Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to tonight's Renewable Energy and Sustainable Living presentation brought to you by MAREA, the Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Association. I'm Phil Jones, tonight's host. MAREA is a 501c3 nonprofit grassroots organization made up of volunteers dedicated to educating and engaging the public and advocating for renewable energy production, energy efficiency, and sustainable living. We encourage you to listen, ask questions, experiment with what you learn, and help others become more sustainable. Before we get started, we want to remind you a recording of last month's presentation by Pritpal Singh about the fundamentals of solar PV technologies and the opportunities it is making for development around the world is available on our website in corrected form. Dr. Singh re-recorded the presentation portion to correct the audio, and your questions were added back in. You will also find many of our past presentations on our website, themarea.org, and our YouTube channel. On YouTube, just search for Mid-Atlantic Renewable Energy Association, all spelled out, and you'll find over 65 of our presentations. We also want to highlight upcoming August and September presentations. August 25th, we take you on a path to better home performance, reducing your energy use and improving your comfort, presented by Scott Sidlow, Principal of Solstice Home Performance. Scott will share ways to reduce your energy use, especially in the area of your building envelope, that sweater and breathable raincoat you need to stay more comfortable in the summer heat and later in the winter cold. September 29th, Cameron Best from Brightcore Energy will present geothermal heat pump solutions from home to commercial size and the many ways geothermal can be effectively implemented for very efficient heating and cooling. And now for tonight's presentation. During the presentation, please mute your microphones. You can enter questions or comments into the chat box, which our speaker will address at the end of his presentation. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Gil Jones, tonight's speaker. Gil Jones is a senior PV solutions engineer with Qcells North America, the largest producer of solar panels in the US market and world's sixth largest producer of solar panels. Qcells supplies and integrates utility, commercial, and residential solar and storage technologies. Gil started his solar career as an apprentice to Pennsylvania solar pioneer and longtime MAREA leader Bill Hennessy, principal of Burke Solar. Gil has experience in residential and building integrated solar design, commercial rooftop and solar racking, solar applications, and new product introduction and marketing. Gil is based in the California Bay Area, where he supports product management and utility sales across the country. And I'm particularly proud to say he's my son. Welcome, Gil.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'll give a couple of words of introduction about myself, so that you all can best understand what my perspective is, what kind of information I might know, what I might not know, as it pertains to some of the questions that you all enter in the chat. Um, so yeah, I've been with Qcells for 3 years, and prior to that, I worked in commercial racking, so rooftop flat rooftop, so something like Best Buy, IKEA, Amazon warehouse. Before that, I worked on some residential and building integrated PV, which are like solar shingle technologies. Also worked in various residential design and residential installation with Bill Hennessy. Currently at Qcells, what I'm doing, my title is solutions engineer, but really what I'm doing is helping out with market assessment, determining what kind of areas of the US market need to be better supported, kind of adapting the global strategy to the US market. So there's a lot of additional market research that I do. And though my title is an engineer, a lot of what I do is related to kind of marrying engineering and market analysis. So particularly what I'm supporting is utility scale. We say DG and utility scale, meaning like distributed generation, community solar, and utility scale installation. So most of that is going to be currently what I'm working on is like the sort of large PV farms out in the middle of the country, where a lot of the volume comes from, although not a lot of the margin. So you can think of those large installations on the ground, not on the roof. and a lot of them have like single axis tracker, um, and some of them are fixed tilt ground mount. Um, so yeah, let me know if you have any questions about Qcells and the products that we're working on. We are also having a lot of residential market topics that I touch kind of tangentially, so I can also answer some questions about that since we're also market leader in that area. Um, so yeah, let's take a look at my slide deck here and get started. So I'll be presenting for about an hour, and then we'll move on to questions, and we can talk a little bit about some of the market in general as well. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, great. Okay, so
Can you
yeah,
share it in theater? There we go. Yeah.
yeah, picking up from where Dr. Singh started. So we'll talk little bit about where solar is deployed in the US. So this is one of our installations. So at my company, we're touching a lot of areas. So we're doing solar panel manufacturing is our main bread and butter, but we're also doing installation in residential and in utility scale. We also do sell components of the system, like a tracker, where the module is attached to. We sell battery solutions, both for large scale and for residential. We sell a lot of O&M services. We also perform an asset owner, so we're kind of touching all parts of the value chain. So I can comment on any other areas outside of manufacturing. So I'll talk a little bit about how the market is broken down. We'll talk a little bit about what a module's lifespan is and what you might see in your warranty versus what happens in real life in the field. We'll touch briefly on US assembly and where the gaps are for expanding US assembly. Um, and then we'll have some time for questions towards the end. Um, so, as a global overview, we passed 3 terawatts of installed solar in 2026. So a lot of that is outside of the US. Unfortunately, we are lagging behind in the United States, but we're catching up quickly because of some of the expanded energy needs. So our grid is a lot less green, but we can say that in some of the areas with a lot higher demand, if folks are requiring a source of energy to spun up quite quickly, solar is able to deliver. Um, so with the emergence of a lot of demand from data center, heat wave, EVs, a lot of these different factors that touch different segments of the market, solar is able to help out quite significantly, especially in different financial packages. So the way that we look at it is that it has one of the lowest levelized cost of energy. So it's over the life of the installation. Solar has one of the lower um, cents per kilowatt hour delivered. It's also, if you think of how long it takes to install a solar project, whether it's on your roof or out in the field, it's on the order of months, whereas a new coal plant, a new nuclear plant might take years. So it's now the largest installed generating tech in the world by capacity, and but it is only hitting 10% of global electricity demand so far. So where the US is landing is that solar is the largest source of new power added to the grid. It should continue to be so, even with the addition of some of these gas plants that are required as peaker plants or as additionally for co-located AI power generation. So we installed 43 gigawatts in 2025. It did drop below 2024. Part of that is due to some of legislation, and some of it is due to just various factors that affect different states differently. So, in under the Biden administration, we had the IRA, which helped fund a lot of new infrastructure spending, among which was U.S. domestic manufacturing. So, included with that, my company was securing some billions of investment as well as federal loan and funding and support from DOE, where we've been expanding plants out in Georgia, where we're producing over 8 gigawatts of module production annually. And we also have just earlier this month launched our 3 gigawatt of US cell production. So when it comes to the sort of bill of materials of your solar panel, the biggest cost is going to be the cell. Um, the it's sort of a sandwich. So you have the cell right in the center, and then you have a plastic kind of encapsulant. So that's sort of your both electrical insulation and kind of your glue that holds everything together. So, and what the encapsulant is gluing together is going to be your glass, and you can put glass on the front. And now commercial and utility panels have glass on the back. And then there's a few more components, like we have diodes, a junction box, and a aluminum frame on the exterior. So the reason I bring that up is during this period of IRA and now one big beautiful bill kind of paradigm, we have the introduction of some US cell manufacturers. So Qcells had US modules since 2019, and that's just the assembly of imported components. However, the cell has been something that the IRA has been supporting quite strongly, and now we have a few cell manufacturers online. So the cell is the largest component, both by cost, it's most critical as far as the kind of technology goes. It's the most difficult to manufacture. Some of these other components are able to come into the US very quickly, like the encapsulant is just something that's kind of a plastics product that is just easy to make in the US. But the cell is quite challenging, and we've seen folks run into a number of issues. We've had our own delays with our own cell factory. And what is incentivized with the US cell is the addition of a tax credit. So there's an ITC adder where projects are uh, with enough domestic content are able to benefit from additional tax credits. So for residential, there is no longer a general federal tax credit that ended at the end of 2025. But there are additional tax credits that are applicable to commercial and utility scale projects. So we did have a July 4th deadline for the general tax credits, but if you do incorporate domestic content, those are extending to a certain degree. Um, so focusing a little bit on the Pennsylvania market, where I think a lot of the folks on the call are based. Um, so Pennsylvania was actually third in the country for new installations behind California and Illinois. So what the focus is, depending on the market, is if you find you're in a state with very high cost of energy, so if you're basically having a high utility bill, whether you're a business or a homeowner, that's going to drive residential market. But if you have certain factors that will benefit from a utility scale, like cheap cost of land, um, low cost of labor, apparent interconnection. Um, so you can benefit from larger volume that come out of the utility scale market. So these numbers don't mean that you guys are going to see more roofs with solar on it necessarily. That's more so driven by the cost of energy and the backfeed rate. But you know, you may see some in the middle of Pennsylvania where it's a little bit more rural. So, SEIA, which is an industry group that I'm a part of and a lot of other manufacturers are part of, mentions that Pennsylvania notices that businesses are trying to get out from under these issue of rising electricity rates. So, the incentives do not seem to be there in the Pennsylvania market to be driving demand, but the rising rates do seem to be the situation. So a lot of folks in commercial market are getting into PPAs where or similar kind of financial arrangements where you're having, let's say you have a business that's like a Best Buy. You can have your roof and you can either have the modules on the roof installed and you could own that system. That's the case with something like an IKEA. Or if you're like uh, a smaller kind of a company, you might lease out your roof so that somebody else can generate electricity on your roof. Alternatively, you might lease the modules and the system um, as just like a simple kind of a lease structure where you're producing power, or you might enter in a PPA where you're purchasing electricity at an agreed upon rate. That agreed upon rate rolls in the cost of the installation, the components, the upkeep. And that's something that's seen a lot on the residential market as well. Um, so when businesses are trying to get out from under the electricity rates, they are a lot of the time entering into a PPA where they're locked into a given rate that's lower for the lifetime of the system, be that like 15 or 20 years or longer. So, SEIA is showing that Pennsylvania is underdeveloped compared with neighboring states. So that'll be like New Jersey. There's a lot more um, higher cost of electricity there. Additionally, Pennsylvania just being more rural on a per capita basis, folks having more land and less expense. There's a lot of rooftops that are out there that are available, and a lot of brownfield available for these kind of community solar or DG scale um, applications. So another factor about this kind of underdevelopment is you may hear about congested interconnection queues. This is a problem throughout the country. Um, so interconnection queues, along with permitting delays, are affected largely by the electrical utility, and then the permitting delays are also affected by local government. So I recently heard some input about a system where folks were concerned about having panels nearby, how that's going to affect the land, how it's going to affect the price of the land, how it's going to factor in with livestock contamination concerns, etc. So if you have any of those kind of concerns, I'm happy to address them. But you know, in my opinion, it's definitely less polluting than typical kind of farm infrastructure and fertilizer. But you know, they're all kind of concerns that come up when you're trying to get a project done. So there are a few bills that you can watch out for in Pennsylvania related to net metering. So net metering is the backfeed rate I mentioned. That's really critical for you guys to get your either your ROI or to get a better PPA price, especially on residential systems. There is a point about virtual power plants. So that's kind of a more innovative application where um, folks are having third-party owned systems on their roofs and coupled with um, uh, a battery energy storage system, they are going to have the ability to release power back to the grid. And that power can replace something like a gas peaker plant or some other kind of adjustment that the electrical utility would need to make, which has the highest kind of marginal utility um, if you think of it in economic terms. So what that's doing is that's opening up the market a lot, and it's making it more advantageous for installers and third-party owners to come into the market. So that's a bill that might open up that possibility. So where I live, there are incentives in place for these battery systems to feed back into the grid if there are either power outages, if there's like a heat wave and folks have a lot of air conditioning coming online. So these battery systems have a way of interacting with the grid where the utility is making a request, and in a certain number of milliseconds, that local battery resource is filling that request so that there's not like a brownout or something like that. And that is really worth its weight in gold to the utility and also to the folks that the utility is paying. So it's not that the actual amount of electricity is that great, but that capacity is really critical. Um, so that can be rolled into your PPA agreement or into another kind of structure. I won't talk too much about the utility hosting capacity. We can potentially come back to that. Um, so what I touched on with these kind of markets is that there are two major broken out areas. So what I work a lot on is getting kind of customer feedback about the module. And so there are basically two main types of modules. There's basically the big ones and the small ones. So effectively, all that anyone's trying to do is get solar cells in front of the sun. That's all that we're doing at the end of the day. How you do that and who you do that for is all that dictates what happens with the module and the whole rest of your project. So, in the utility scale, you might have something like a 78 cell PV module. So that's going to be something like 2.3 meters tall. Whereas in residential, you're going to have something that's more like, I don't know, a 60 cell module. It's going to be like 1.7 meters tall. So when it comes to marketing these different kind of products where you have the same kind of engine, you just have a different number of cells in the module. You can use the same kind of cells. You can use the same kind of encapsulant glass. The frame might be a little different, but largely they're very similar, and it's just the size that varies. But they're really driven by different things. So in the utility segment, we have a saying that is just hang the glass, which means just get solar panels in front of the sun, get it installed, get it out there, by any means necessary, the cheapest way possible. Um, so utility scale is really having lower margins, and it is about three-quarters of the volume. Um, and it is largely affected by federal policy because there's a lot of things that can squeeze on that smaller margin. So it's less elastic. So that's something where a lot of things are bought in great volume. So if you can think about a car manufacturer, so a car maybe kind of similar price to a residential solar system. So you might go and buy one single car, and that car is really important to you, and you want it to be of really good quality. You want it best get the best efficiency, power, etc. But if you're a car rental company, you're gonna go out buy um, you know, 10,000 Ford Focuses at a really low rate. The Ford makes a really low margin, but they get to sell a lot of cars, and most importantly, they keep the factory and that capex that goes into the factory kind of um, well allocated. So the residential market is that single car getting sold. So it's a lot smaller, but there's a lot more margin. So it's affected a lot more by household economics. So like the addition of people buying EVs. Even EV incentives can affect the solar market. So, household economics, the state of the economy, the state of interest rates, really affect the residential market quite a lot. Um, so, um, commercial, which kind of lands in between those two, um, is a little bit of a mix of both of those markets. So it can be a little bit more like utility scale sometimes and a little bit more like residential other times. So commercial does have more of an emphasis on module efficiency. And there's some other factors like structural weight limit and some other items. So yeah, like I mentioned, residential is really focused on things like appearance, warranty, and having like one company to call when something breaks. Um, Another item I'll touch on is the concept of bankability. So a lot of folks have found that there's a lot of churn in the solar industry. So as incentives come and go, as certain states come on and offline, as federal policy changes, it can affect things quite a bit. So folks at different areas of the value chain will go bankrupt at different lengths of time. So the same solar companies that were around 10 years ago are largely not around right now. So there's been many that have uh, come and gone. For example, SunPower. Um, these days, what residential folks are looking for is having one kind of company that they can interact with when it comes to holding the warranty. They don't want to work with somebody that's going to go out of business. So that would be for anybody on the line that has an interest in buying a new system. I would really try to look for something where as many of those warranties are rolled together as possible, especially when it includes labor costs. So that's something that um, I feel like Qcells has been a market leader in since we've been around for quite a number of these boom and bust cycles, and we have a lot of skin in the game when it comes to these kind of market factors as well as the U.S. market. So we do have a lot of presence of companies that are kind of I wouldn't say Chinese owned, but perhaps Chinese controlled. So that's a major factor these days. And the US market being relatively small compared to China, some of these folks could take or leave the US market because it is one of the most difficult markets to operate in. A lot of folks prioritize um, the large volume in Asia that they can more easily deploy, more cheaply deploy. Um, and they're having modules made in China that are more easy to install. So I definitely applaud the Asian market for being able to stand up so many gigawatts of production. However, in the US, it can be a better bet to work with a company that has more of a US footprint. So that's something that I'm trying to support with Qcells. That's something that Bill Hennessy really believed in. So if you have any questions on U.S. market, it's kind of one of my specialty areas. Um, so size and weight, as I mentioned, are really critical. Bifacial modules are something that um, are really critical and now default in the US utility and commercial market. We now have the entry of N-type wafers and cells replacing P-type. So now 70% of world production is N-type. So we have new cell technologies that run cooler and degrade less in the first year. So um, they will both produce more energy in the first year and then they will degrade slower. So they'll produce more energy over a 30-year lifetime. Um, so these are really critical when it comes to areas that have a lot more sun production, like Las Vegas. But as you guys might know, any kind of um, electrical item like that might have some reduced efficiency in such a high heat. So that's something that's really exciting about these new kind of N-type cells that have been introduced. Um, Another major market factor is hail. So that's something that came out of kind of the Texas market, but is now really critical. So if you think of us hanging these thin sheets of glass in front of out in the field or on your roof, that's a really critical point. Is hail can really um, do some damage to a module. Another kind of marginal factor is wind and snow loading. So we have kind of an industry standard of 2400 Pascal wind and snow loading, meaning wind load being kind of the amount of force that can be taken on the backside of the module, snow load kind of nominally on the front of the module. So that's something that's seeing a lot of industry drive is we have this kind of standard, but how can we improve on it? So, a lot of folks, when I go to these industry conferences, are talking about what is the effect of all of these weather factors together. So, we have a very kind of simple nominal way of measuring it, but what's really the more what does the real world field data show us? Um, so there's kind of um, there can be sometimes a gap between product management decision making and what do folks actually need to have out in the field. Um, so I'll talk a little bit about the roadmap for cell improvements. So back in 2015, we had kind of the standard P-type P-type cells that have been the norm, and largely a lot of this PERC has been PERC P-type cells, and PERC stands for passivated emitter rear contact technology. That's been around since 2013 or 2015, and was standard up until around like 2020. So around that time, there's been an industry shift. Largely, you first see industry shifts come out of Asia. So a lot of the Chinese producers started coming up with an N-type wafer and applying a TOPCon cell technology, which is able to push us a couple of efficiency points higher. So when we measure module efficiency, basically all we're doing is we are shining a bright light with a specific spectrum range of light on the module and measuring what its power output is while that light is on, basically. And if it's bifacial, we'll measure both sides. So that efficiency measurement basically indicates how much power per unit area that module will get. And that power per unit area is going to be more critical for more space constrained sites. So like your residential rooftop will be an area where you want to see high efficiency. And so there is kind of a theoretical limit when it comes to each cell technology. So it's kind of a physical limit when it comes to how these cells are constructed, how many of those photons at that given wavelength can be absorbed and converted to electrical current. So we started out at something like 20% average cell efficiency. And that was what we thought the practical limit was back in sort of the 2015 time range. These days, we're targeting more like a 24% cap. So a lot of the modules are at like 23%, and then the cells might be 1 or 2 points above that. And then with new innovations in these kind of N-type modules, we're hitting somewhere around 25% theoretical with more like a 23 point, high 23 percentage efficiency for the modules. So that tends to be how things kind of work is we'll um, try to target a manufacturing efficiency band that's a few points behind what the physical limit is. We're not going to be able to hit the physical limit. We don't want to get too close to it because then we're too reliant on having very precise manufacturing. So we try to remain a few points behind that and have the R&D push us, into the future here. So this is one of the kind of recent um, kind of improvements from the past handful of years. Um, so we have three kind of main technologies. So I mentioned P-type and N-type. So PERC is P-type. TOPCon and heterojunction cells make up the N-type. Um, currently, it's there were multiple P-type approaches, but we all kind of landed on PERC being the most efficient, and that's what we've gone with. A similar thing is happening with N-type technologies. So TOPCon and heterojunction technologies are battling it out right now. TopCon seems to be the way that it's going. So currently in China, almost everybody makes TopCon. They have actually, I won't say outlawed, but not really made it possible to make the older perk cells anymore, and to have those sold in China anymore. And HJT, they found that it requires too much capital expenditure. So it's a little bit more of a complex technology. It requires that there are fewer manufacturing imperfections and there are some risks when it comes to field deployment and some issues like the effect of UV, moisture ingress, etc. Um, let's see. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about where we're looking in the future. So we have a perovskite tandem cell technology that um, is built upon the TopCon technology. So when it comes to where we're looking for the future, so something more like a 28% or even higher cell efficiency. Um, what we're doing is we're pairing this current TopCon layer with the addition of a perovskite layer. So you may hear this called perovskite tandem, tandem cell technology, anything like that. So that's kind of where we're going as an industry for the next generation. So basically, the folks that are researching this kind of in academia and more on a more experimental and theoretical level have identified that in order to make future bounds um, in these kind of efficiency limits, what we need to do is take this current N-type technology that absorbs a given wavelength of light and add on top of that a transparent layer that will absorb a completely different wavelength of light. So what we're doing is we're just finding two wavelength bands that complement each other and basically marrying those together. So that is still several years away. So we're targeting something like 2029 at Qcells for that optimistically. So that might be still kind of challenging. So um, there are several kind of factors that come into play when we discuss how do these modules get deployed, how durable are they, and do they meet the warranty needs of customers? So with perovskite tandem, we're at a very kind of experimental level of research. So we produced the first kind of commercial cells. We produced an M10 size cell out of the perovskite tandem, and we've tested it, and it demonstrates some leading module efficiency. However, in general, in industry, we still need to do a better job of characterizing the degradation behavior of these perovskite cells. So when you have to have a new cell technology that is much more complex because you're essentially having two cells in one, and you have to have much more complex methods of both creating the cell, protecting the cell, and then making sure that these um, uh, charge carriers don't degrade over time. There are a lot of things that need to be accounted for. So one of these is the presence of UV. So that was a factor that affected these N-type modules when they first came on the market. Is how do we protect them adequately from UV exposure? So um, the way that it typically occurs is academia will check what is really the behavior here? How do we characterize that? How do we turn that characterization into a test? So one of the things that I support is the testing of UV in a test chamber. So we'll just take our module, throw it in front of UV light for a certain duration at a certain strength of light, and then measure the power before and after. So just a very simple degradation test to try to simulate field exposure. So another point that N-type modules used to have more of an issue with, and perovskite are right now, is what we call damp heat. So it's basically just um, kind of a high humidity, high temperature environment. And that might be an issue for any kind of semiconductor technology. So, you know, if your laptop is exposed to high humidity and high heat, that's going to be really bad for it for different reasons. But the cell here needs to be resistant to all of these kinds of degradation modes. So these were degradation modes that were a focus on N-type technologies. Um, they do appear as well in perovskite technologies. The question right now remains, how do we figure out which of these degradation modes still is an issue? So what we do are a lot of field studies. So we're starting some field studies internally soon, where we're going to be deploying perovskite modules out in the field, seeing what is it, how do they degrade, how do they degrade more importantly in comparison to the current modules that we're producing, under what conditions do they degrade, and what's causing that issue. So all of this gets folded into the warranty that you as the consumer might see. So if you have like something like a 30-year power warranty, manufacturers like Qcells are having a let's say 89% power warranties. So in year 30, you should be seeing still 89% of the original production. So when it comes to the deployment of these solar assets in the field, there are kind of a couple of different um, failure timelines that you'll see. Some of those will be in year one. You'll have a certain portion of the population that fails right off the bat. And the other ones you're going to see that degrade faster than what's planned. And the issue with any kind of degradation that occurs faster than what's planned is folks won't be able to invest in that project. So if you think that your cells are not going to be stable in UV, then how can you, in your right mind, purchase millions and millions of dollars in modules, put those in front of the sun or put that on top of your roof, and think to yourself that you're gonna the system's gonna pay for itself after so many years. So those are the kind of risks that we're considering. So after these get characterized in academia, and they come up with some kind of test where they're saying, "Oh, guys, we discovered that these new cells are degrading under these kind of circumstances." What will happen is eventually we'll have some new foundations in the IEC, which is our International Electrical Commission standards that govern solar panels, among other things, and dictate what kind of tests should a solar panel undergo within a test chamber to make sure that they're going to be safe, produce power, and able to perform over the lifetime. So the safety issue is separate, of course, from that power issue. So we have other items like if there's moisture ingress that would cause a short between certain parts of the panel, or if you touch the frame that you wouldn't get electrocuted, etc. So ensuring that the solar panel is a safe part of the system, as it interacts with the racking inverter, etc. So all of that kind of feeds together into the business decisions of the module manufacturer to offer a certain kind of power guarantee that the consumer is going to require. So when it comes to perovskite tandem, all of these items are under consideration. But I want to emphasize that I think the industry has a long way to go when it comes to perovskite technology. So probably what we're going to see first is production of perovskite in places like China, Japan, Malaysia. First, we'll see those those modules get launched, purchased by folks that are less price conscious, perhaps. And then after that, we'll see it move into Europe. And then it'll come to the US. And then once it comes into the US, it'll come to residential market first because the larger price premium is commanded there. And then it'll lead into utility market. So a lot of these things hit the US market last because we're more kind of risk averse, and folks are a little bit more stringent, and we have higher project installation costs. So all of those things kind of come together to affect the economics of what kind of demand pressure do we put on the folks in R&D to make a new kind of product, get released. Let's see. So I think those are most of the topics that I wanted to talk about today. I'll open it up for questions, I think.
Thank you, Gil. Yes, we'll start out with some questions. We don't have a lot of questions yet, so feel free to enter your questions in the chat box. And if for some reason you have a question that we don't get to, we can have you ask us in person. So thank you, Gil. Excellent presentation. Chuck?
Yeah, I'll take the first question.
Okay, Joe. Thanks.
Okay. Regarding residential and appearance, over a decade ago, Elon Musk promised solar slates that would make a solar roof look just like a slate roof, ideal for aesthetically sensitive historic districts, etc. Unsurprisingly, he never delivered on the promises. Can you speak a few sentences about that type of residential solar tile And I understand that in the United Kingdom, there exist such slate products that are commercially active, but they are not available in the United States.
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I'm not certain that that product is. I believe it was canceled. I think I heard. But we should follow up and check on that. But in any case, the true kind of solar shingle, as Tesla was developing, I understand didn't sell in large volume and wasn't produced in large volume. Tesla's now working on a more straightforward module design, and some U.S. manufacturing out of Buffalo, New York, is planned where they'll be making, I believe, their own cells, as well as the module. At least that's the kind of that's the marketing right now. Um, so I I've seen most of these kind of solar shingles get sold into the new homes market, as well as places that require new construction to have solar. I think California has some kind of requirement that new residential construction have solar, and if folks want to just sort of comply with that requirement, then maybe they'll have a certain segment of their roof go into this kind of solar shingle. Um, so from what I've seen, these aren't terribly in demand, and they tend to have lower efficiency numbers. They do have an advantage where they can be a portion of the mechanical installation can be installed by a well-trained roofer. So that was something that I worked on. There's been a product by GAF Energy in the past as well, but I think we've seen a lot of these. Products not get picked up too strongly in the U.S. market. So I don't think that that's something that's going to come back until there's a lot of efficiency gains that are made from the cell first. So I think maybe in 10 years is what I would say. Um, yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
Gil, I wrote the next question. Basically, I'm asking if you overcame the problems with damp heat for the N-type higher efficiency cells, is there a bigger barrier to overcome using that same approach to make the perovskite cells more less degraded?
Yeah,
Is it
that's
a
a great.
bigger problem for perovskites than for the N-type?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, a lot of the approaches to damp heat resistance were typical of what we see with the introduction of a new cell technology. And I think a lot of the improvements come with what kind of encapsulant do you marry to that kind of a cell. So there are a lot of different approaches to the damp heat concern, a lot of different approaches to the UV concern, that come from chemistry, both from the cell and from the encapsulant. So I think that what we're going to see is some major improvements in the manufacturing approach. So the same kind of perovskite cell result, but manufactured in a different way, in a such that some portions of the cell are more stable. And then additionally, you have to come up and just really experiment with a lot of different encapsulant chemistries. Um, so with N-type cells, there are different kind of performance that come from polyolefin, come from EVA, EPE. So you can have all kind of different chemistries that you apply there, and I think that'll be something that is a lot more simple to apply to the perovskite tech. But it really starts with a cell. So I think really the cell is not quite as stable as we would want to see if you want something deployed in the field for 30 years.
Interesting. So I need a polymer chemist.
Yeah, polymer chemist, a lot of
Material
material
science.
scientists,
Yeah.
improving these kind of, and a lot of folks improving the manufacturing as well. Um, so we started out with perovskite cells that would degrade after like several hours. And now we have them that they should be stable for, many months. And then soon we'll get to the point where they're stable over many years.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Because they're inherently, if I understand it correctly, they're inherently easier and less energy intensive to actually fabricate because you don't have to heat silicon to some high temperature.
Yeah, there are some advantages. Yeah, there are it does depend on what your approach is. So a lot of the commercial approaches to the perovskite tandem technology are not entirely aligned in industry. So I think there are some folks that can do it more efficiently than others. When it comes to the manufacturing difficulty and a lot of the energy expenditure that goes into the module, a lot of it does come from the silicon and wafer production, which is quite energy intensive.
Right. Okay, we have another question here from George. He's asking, in a commercial scale ground mount system, what's the trade-off between single axis and fixed angle? Under what conditions does the addition of a battery to the system make economic sense?
Okay, got it. So for ground mount, single axis and fixed tracker, so a lot of it depends on what is your trade-off between um, energy production need and energy density need. One example, I've had some folks approach me about data centers where they need a lot of they're very limited on land. So in that kind of application, you want to do like a fixed tilt ground mount. Um, kind of situation. Whereas if I go to one of my earlier slides where we can see this kind of two-in portrait kind of arrangement for the trackers. So you just have a lot more space in between the trackers because they're kind of taller and you have more row to row shading. So it just depends on, do you have a lot of space or do you not? And then are you willing to spend a lot more on the tracker and are you willing to have folks go out and service the tracker? So if you have more, that's why you see more of like a utilities kind of system where they factor in all that upkeep and um, are able to make the project economics work for more expensive racking. They're more willing to spend more on the tracker.
Then
Um,
what about the battery system?
Right. The battery system basically, an example will be for residential or commercial in California. We have really kind of punishing time of use, or you might call it like demand rate charges. So either depending on, so for myself, I have like between 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock, my electricity rate goes up because here we have a lot of solar already saturating generation, but we have it during the sunny part of the day, right? So my utility is incentivizing reduced use during a certain time of day. And what the battery can do is help you bridge that gap. So you just self-consume off your battery during the more expensive portion of the day, and you can also do a little bit of energy arbitrage, or you can also engage in that virtual power plant kind of thing where you make your some of your battery capacity available to the utility. So any of those three items. So on commercial side, they'll have more demand-driven kind of charges. So if they have a high demand during a certain time of the day, they can offset that by self-consuming off their battery during their very high demand part of the day. and that helps to lower their rate. So I think in general, the battery systems are very expensive, but if you, depending on what your usage is like, it's really helpful. Um, and definitely if you have an EV, that's going to play a big role.
Okay. Joe, do you want to get the next one or?
Sure. Another question. Your thoughts on plug-in balcony solar, especially related to residential safety and also likely demand?
Okay, so yeah, the balcony solar situation is pretty interesting. So that's something that came out of Europe, especially during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, causing their energy, rates to skyrocket. So that's come to Vermont, and I think a couple other states are working on it. So I know that it's in Vermont and maybe New York or Oregon or something like that. So the balcony solar concept is simply taking a module, having some kind of inverter so that you go from DC to AC, and plugging that into either a separate dedicated circuit and certain devices. You can have a couple of different ways that you interact with it. So this is kind of, I guess, what solar was like in like the 70s. So you can do that, but the problem is, what does your utility think about that? And your utility thinks that if they power off the lines and you feed power back onto the lines, that they're going to be electrocuted. So they do not want you to do that. I personally feel that it's very risky. Um, the benefits are fairly marginal, but I do think that if you plug it into a separate battery, or onto a dedicated circuit that is managed differently, then that can be fine. But I think that really um, the safety aspect hasn't been well addressed. I think it's fine that Vermont utilities are allowing it, but until like NFPA and NEC make it more widely um, kind of acceptable for line workers and firefighters, then we're going to have a safety issue, where there's risk of all kinds of things, namely fire and electrocution, and arc flash situations. So I think that folks are doing it on like sort of a homesteading, very small basis, and they're getting away with it. But I know that if I did it, PG&E would have several $1,000 fee if I backfeed, and I haven't told them about it. So it's fine if I just run one constant appliance like heating or something off of it, theoretically, but if there's any kind of backfeeding, then it's really risky. So there's all kind of things to keep in mind there. So I think it has a really interesting future ahead of it. So I think that we'll have to watch out for what kind of controls the EU market places on these before US feels like it's acceptable, really. And that's the way that these things always go: is innovation happens somewhere else. US is more risk averse. Once the problems get ironed out, then we can buy them.
I think they're doing it in Europe and uh, in certain countries. I forget. I think it's France. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
Solar development is the definition of brownfields land that isn't suitable for farming or residential development. What is your definition for what's a suitable brownfield?
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not a developer, although I work with some developers. So yeah, brownfield is going to be like a landfill usually, or there's all kind of similar things. Like you can have land that's like too contaminated, or something that used to be like an industrial site, land that's not otherwise used for different different kind of applications, and you have um, that land will sell for very cheap or at least for very, very low price, and you can develop solar there. So I think the main issue is going to be the civil risk. So if there's as long as the land is very stable, and there's something that folks feel like they can build piles on, then they can build trackers there. So um, I think as long as there's not any kind of civil risk, not too many ground undulation. I mean, not that the ground would move, but that it's level ground, that folks can dig trenches without issue, that kind of thing, then it'll work out fine. So
All right. Joe, you want to get the next one?
Sure. The excellence of your presentation answered many of my questions. We had a 20 cell installation done in 2017. Are our cells older, requiring some update with newer technology?
okay, that's a really good question. So, how have things changed from like a typical solar panel in 2017 until now? I would say that probably probably upgrade is not needed. However, if you were interested in expanding your system, that would probably be a good time to upgrade. So if you feel like your current installation, usually what happens with folks is if the current installation is meeting your needs, then you should definitely just leave it. Um, but if you feel like you want to have an installer there, that would be the time to roll in those costs with the new modules. Roll it in with the new installation and the new inverter and everything else. So usually that comes with the purchase of an EV, or if you had some kids, either one.
Here's a futuristic question. Is there a future for solar panels attached to cars?
No, but there is one for solar panels attached to RVs. So give it, I would say it'll need at least 10 years until if they're attached to cars, if there's um much major utility there. I think based on um the current consumption rate of EVs, it's not going to add too many miles to it. But if you have something like an RV where you just have like a few appliances that you want to run in the background, that's when it kind of seems to make more sense. Um, if you want to kind of avoid generator usage. Um, so it does seem to be like a kind of constant low load is good. But for the EVs, usually it makes sense to just take those same solar panels, put them on a carport instead, have a charger there.
Okay. Are there two-sided glass modules more efficient on a
Mhm.
ground mount or a roof mount?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So residences do not have, uh, I won't say do not have, often don't have bifacial gain at all because they're just so flush to the roof. Um, And so that for that market, sometimes there will be transparent rear side, just because it doesn't cost anything more on the solar panel, and maybe you get a tiny, tiny boost. Um, but yeah, largely that rear side gain is going to come from either commercial rooftop, it's kind of marginal, or for these tracker installations where you have a steeper pitch and then more room with less shade for those modules to catch rear side, not sun, but not direct sun, but just general albedo out of the sky. Um, so that said, it's still marginal even for our installations out in the field. So one of the reasons there's two reasons why we put glass on the rear side at my company. So one of them is for that bifacial gain, but another one of them is really just for extra durability. The glass is a bit more durable than putting the encapsulant, like that sheet of plastic, and the on the back. So yeah, bifacial is really great, but it's definitely very marginal.
Be helpful to have a white roof, right?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Joe, you want to get to the next one?
Sure. Is there a future for a solar panel that can be taken when a homeowner moves? I guess for a mobile solar panel.
Um, yeah, so I think if you have Um, some kind of racking that will be easily moved. I mean, the challenge there is having something where you can, um, disassemble and reassemble. So, when I worked on commercial flat roof racking, what we did was we would have the solar panel attached to basically like a large bracket that holds the panel up, and then you'd have basically bricks holding it down. So for that kind of situation, I think you could try to have something. I've seen also systems where you put all the electrical just on like a trailer. So that could be one kind of situation. Especially when it comes to like some of the battery paired systems, there's sort of like mobile units. So I think depending on what the energy needs were of your home, that you could do it, but it's going to be a little bit homespun right now, and some of the permitting is definitely going to be a bit different. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, I think. Yeah, that'll be something to look into, I think.
So can you make us some comments about the LECO approach and what value that has? It was on your slide, but you didn't actually talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's a company that Qcells bought that kind of innovated the LECO laser contact process. Um, so most most folks are using LECO process now, um, and it's something that really allowed TopCon to be possible. Um, so it's basically using laser technology to help make these kind of TopCon cells. So um, there have been some technology disputes about who first developed it and who owns the technology, etc. Um, but yeah, so it's laser enhanced contact optimization. So they're kind of just putting pulses of lasers um, across areas of the cell. So it kind of helps with some of the contact resistivity problems between the electrode and the semiconductor wafer.
It gives
Uh,
it more surface area.
uh, yeah, I believe so. Let me see. Um, it's more of a method of reducing the cell's resistance.
Okay.
Um, so it's a little bit more efficient diffusion between the two layers, so that marrying of the silver portion and the silicon wafer.
Sort of
Okay.
like heat treating.
Yeah, that's a good way of
Hmm.
looking at it. Yeah. So it's kind of a like sort of a laser treatment to the cell in a way.
Okay. Are there any current commercial solar PV shingles?
Not that I'm aware of. I
Sorry, it's
believe
my clock.
um I believe GAF Energy is no longer developing them. I believe Tesla is out of it. I think you could maybe buy some of the GAF still for a little bit, but I don't know how long they'll be on the market. There's sometimes some like smaller manufacturers that do it, but it's doesn't seem like that market is sticking around right now.
Interesting. Does anybody else have a question? If you have a question, you can.
Yeah, I'd like to put in, I don't, I didn't hear much discussion about off-grid setups, and I'm just curious as to why there is not much more, why this constantly trying to put panels in, but connecting them to the grid. Basically, seems to me that you're feeding into the controls of the utility corporations. People constantly complain about, well, the utility companies are stifling this sort of thing like that. And I would
Mhm.
think there would be more promotion of simply going off grid and telling the utility companies to go fly a the rope.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's entirely dependent on the person who's buying the system. So I can I think the demand in off-grid application is fairly small, but there is more flexibility that is going to be coming in the future. So more of a hybrid system if you want to just self-consume off battery, ignore what the grid is up to. But when it comes to being completely off grid and you don't need to deal with any of these kind of utility concerns, yeah, that's possible if you have a house that is kind of compatible with that situation. So it all depends on what you want to do. So the grid is offering a lot of flexibility, and I think it's paying people if there's backfeed, right? But if you have your own battery that you're charging and then consuming from, and you have DC circuits, for example, that might not be an issue. So yeah, I mean, there's some flexibility that comes from that. A portion of our market is from places that don't connect to the grid, and because of some of these, even on the larger scale market, because of some of these interconnection um, uh, and kind of permitting slowdowns that, for example, the AI companies can't stomach, they will go ahead and just have their own off-grid system or a microgrid or some other kind of arrangement. So I think there's some kind of future for it. It depends on what you want to do. Like, so if you want to just be in an RV, if you want to have something for emergency purposes, if you just want to do it just to do it, it really depends. It's unfortunately not as well supported by a lot of the um, you know, inverter manufacturers as we might like, but as the whole market grows, that very small segment of the pie might grow.
Well, that's just
We,
my point, that there doesn't seem to be, that the industry doesn't seem to be really supporting this. And of course, I look
Mhm.
at my neighborhood, I just had a neighbor put solar on their roof, and I see a lot of south-oriented roofs around here, and um, they aren't interested, aren't doing it. But when every time we have a power outage around here, we just laugh because we are off grid and we never lose our power uh, when they do. So.
Yeah, yeah.
but
So, I mean, you might see them starting to get interested in buying batteries or generators or.
yeah, we're starting to see a market for solar generators, and also see starting to see a market for cabins where they're too far to consider getting on the grid, and see people doing that. But I think unfortunately we're culture of convenience, and people feel like no matter what, they want to be able to get their electricity. Sadly, they don't see all the aspects of that when their power goes out. But Yeah.
You're basically saying Americans were lazy.
Well, or maybe not willing to do as much innovation as we claim to be, to
Yeah,
claim to
I
be
think
as innovative.
another question might be like, how is the installer base supporting it? So can you find
Yeah.
folks that will install an off-grid system? Um, or is that something that the homeowner just needs to do themselves? And then you have questions of like, is your own system going to have as much uptime as the grid?
Obviously, we're uptime all the time. And but I just remember back when we put it in, that Pennsylvania would not support off-grid installations.
Mhm.
So yeah, he had to be connecting into the utilities, which I felt, that was certainly a biased part on the part of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, there's a lot of pushback against it because they want to have control over their safety risk, and there's not as much upside for them. Whereas there's some risk. So naturally, they're just going to say, "Well, why would I support this if it doesn't help me?"
What do you see as the risks?
Um, I mean, with safety risk, I mean, it's mostly just like a fire thing. So if there's a fire and you have to have some kind of compliant shut-off mechanisms, it's mostly that kind of thing.
I don't see any fire danger at all.
Well, Wes, if the firefighters came to your house and you had power on and they couldn't shut off that power, then they would be at risk if they started.
You say, yeah, but you have the same problem with when you're hooked to the grid, you have to turn off the power.
Exactly. So it comes down to a question of, how's the disconnect work? And that comes down to coming up with regulations, which somebody has to make some effort to do.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it's not enough demand, but maybe there will be. Certainly, if you keep advocating, maybe we'll get some more people on board.
yeah. I mean,
So,
we've had our system for 16 and a half years. Other than replacing our batteries once, we've had no problems.
So as an installer, may I add to this conversation or topic?
Yeah.
Um, yes, Wes. So I understand you live off grid, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
No meter at all?
No,
Okay.
I mean,
Um,
we keep track ourselves, but we don't. Nobody else does.
yeah, so it really takes a lifestyle change for somebody to make that really effective, and a lot of people are not prepared for that. I
I,
often say, are you prepared to live like the Amish or not?
well,
And
we
as
don't. We
an
don't. We don't feel that our lifestyle is any particularly different from people who are connected to the grid. Obviously, I'm sitting here at my computer talking to you guys, so
Yeah, there are a few people that love it. It is a small niche within a niche. Me as an installer, it's often three times the hassle and one-third the profit margin. Most of those potential clients for off-grid are just such a pain in their lack of understanding. But I would like to, I think it will have a future, but it's a niche at this point because of the cost and dedication involved.
yeah. Well, you certainly we're operating as our own utility company, but then on the other hand, we aren't paying anybody either.
I have lived off grid and now I live in a net zero house that I see as has advantages of both sides of the coin. It can operate off grid, but it has all the financial savings of having a meter as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Well,
Interesting debate.
pointed out to some of the problems there already is because if the installers don't like it, don't like to work with it, they're not going to promote it or try to advance it. So you've already pointed to one of the problems here already. And but I think that I don't still quite understand the mentality of people who simply say, well, it's all this work or it's all this or all that. That sounds to me like an excuse for not taking responsibility for their own lives.
So how is your heat done now?
What's that?
How is your heating done?
Heating? We're in a
Yes.
passive solar house.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I love off-grid. It's just very few potential clients fit that uh, mode or fit well. It's often like trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. But yeah, I
Well,
support off-gridders. They both have their place.
yeah, it's an
Thank you.
interesting topic to bring up. I don't think we can close out on it for tonight, but I think it's good to hear a few different sides to this, and I'm glad for people to hear about that there is off-grid out there and that people have successfully done it. So for those who are up for the challenge, maybe it's worth considering.
Well
But like you
said.
say, there's hurdles.
Hey, hi guys. Sorry to jump in like this, but I missed most of the meeting. Our power was out before, and then I was doing things. Yeah, how about that? I don't have. We do have a generator, but it's not enough for everything, and we're keeping other stuff running. And I forgot about the meeting. But if I could, want to ask one quick question. Right now, I've had 15 kilowatts that have been working for me for the past 9 years, and it's good. But there's 2 houses here, and there's a business, and I need more stuff. And I was wondering if somebody would know. I want to put like another 15 kilowatt array together. Would somebody have a recommendation for? Because I could do the work myself. I'm an electrician. I'm retired and whatnot. But yeah, does anybody have a good idea about the best place to buy inverters and panels?
Anyone want to answer that one?
Well, there's do-it-yourselfers and there's those that care about doing it right. I have 20 plus years, 25 years of experience in doing it right. But some people want to do it themselves, and I usually let them figure it out. There are some places like Signature Solar and a more local place called ASI. But we don't specialize in retail sales. It can also be 3 times the hassle and barely worth the it's a different consumer.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm sure it is. I mean, if nobody else has any idea, that's fine. I'll figure it out. But I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Zook. When I do find out, I'm going to be more than happy to share it with other people because I think this is better for the environment. I gotta go. Along with my power outage, I had to open the garage door manually before. Now my wife's out there blowing a horn, and it's raining out, and I'm sure she wants me to go open the door. So anyway, maybe I can catch up with the MAREA moderator. You look kind of familiar too. Sometime, and we could talk about this stuff more. But right
Okay.
now, I got to run downstairs, open the door at least.
Yep.
If you're supposed to
Gene.
take it back, I can talk more. Thanks.
And Ben, you mentioned ASI, and what was the other company that you might suggest?
Signature Solar.
Signature? Okay. There's also on our website, we have a list of solar installers, which Ben is on, of course. And I think there's about 30 solar installers on there. You can download it from the website. We try to keep it current. Sometimes it's not as current as we'd like. It's a moving market, but that's a good source. And we try to mention in there what sort of systems and where they install it. So that's a reference information for you. And then there's also others that lease solar panels, and you can do that through other types of arrangements. There's also some groups in Pennsylvania that are trying to do group buys, and they will advise you. I think we put that on a previous presentation. I'll try to put that in the notes for this of those 2 organizations that you might want to contact. And they're certainly worth a meeting to attend and learn a little bit more about them. They're going to mostly help you with, they try to do bigger buys. So they try to get a better rate for a group of people that agree to buy from a certain manufacturer, but it's up to the people. They're not selling a particular manufacturer. They're allowing the group to make a group decision, and then you're getting the group discount. So there's two groups in Pennsylvania that do that. So wanted to pass that along as well.
Great, thanks.
But I think at this point we need to wrap up. I want to thank Gil very much for sharing all the information from Qcells, and now we have a much better picture from the manufacturer and on a large scale what's going on in this market, because this is a pretty dynamic market, lots of politics in the background, but a lot of technology going on and a lot of improvements on the landscape. So thank you so much for joining us, Gil, in the sunny state of California, and we'll see everyone next month on August 25th to learn about how we can make our homes more comfortable and efficient. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.